The day my son became a stranger. I was standing at the kitchen sink peeling apples for a pie when my phone buzzed. It was a Tuesday morning in October. The light coming through the window was that soft golden kind you only get in fall. I had the radio on low, playing old country songs my mother used to sing. My hands were wet, and the peels were curling into the sink in long, perfect spirals. That was my life for 38 years. Long, perfect spirals in a kitchen I thought would be my forever. The house was on Maple Lane in a small town outside Richmond, Virginia. We bought it in 1986 when the boys were little. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a front porch with a swing my husband Frank hung himself, a backyard where I watched 3 generations of children run through sprinklers and chase fireflies. I planted a dogwood tree when my oldest son Michael was born. That tree was taller than the house by the time the story starts. I used to tell people I wanted to die in that house. I wanted my grandchildren to scatter my ashes under that dogwood. That was the plan. That was always the plan. The phone buzzed again. I dried my hands on my apron and picked it up. It was a text from my daughter-in-law, Kelly. She was married to my youngest son, Brian. They had 2 little girls. Emma was 6, Sophie was 4. I watched those girls every Tuesday and Thursday while Kelly worked at a dental office. I loved those days more than anything. We would bake cookies and color princess pictures, and I would let them jump on the guest bed, even though Frank used to say it would ruin the mattress. Frank had been gone 3 years by then. Lung cancer took him slow and mean. But I had the girls. I had the house. I had my sons. I thought I was one of the lucky ones. The text said, "Call me when you get a chance." Nothing unusual about that. Kelly and I texted all the time. She was more like a daughter than a daughter-in-law. We did Sunday brunch together, even when Brian was working. She told me things she never told her own mother. Her mother lived in Florida, and they barely spoke. Kelly said I was the mother she wished she had. I held her hand when she gave birth to Emma. I held Sophie first, because Kelly was too exhausted. That was the kind of love I thought we had. The kind that bends time and erases the word in-law. I finished the apples and put the pie together. I slid it into the oven and set the timer. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. I called Kelly back. She answered on the first ring. "Hey, Mom," she said. That was what she called me. Mom, not Martha, not my mother-in-law. Mom. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. "What's going on?" There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. Then she said something I didn't understand at first. She said, "Brian needs to talk to you about something important. He wants to come over tonight." "What about?" I asked. She said he would explain. Then she said, "I love you," and hung up. I sat there for a long time after that call. The coffee went cold in my hand. Something felt wrong, but I could not name it. That is the thing about betrayal. It never arrives with a trumpet blast. It arrives like a whisper you pretend not to hear. I told myself Brian probably wanted to talk about the girls, or maybe he was worried about my health because I had been tired lately. I told myself everything was fine. I was good at telling myself that. I had been telling myself that for 40 years. Brian came over at 7 that night. He came alone. No Kelly, no girls. He walked through the front door without knocking because he still had a key from when he lived here in high school. He went straight to the fridge and got a beer like he always did. He sat down at the kitchen table, in the same chair his father used to sit in. That should have been the first real sign, but I was too busy getting plates out for the pie. "How was work?" I asked. "Fine," he said. "The girls are adorable," I said. "Sophie drew me a picture of a horse yesterday. She said it was a unicorn, but it looked like a horse with a carrot on its head." Brian didn't laugh. He just stared at the beer bottle in his hands. He was 41 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a little boy who had broken something and didn't know how to tell his mother. I sat down across from him. The pie was cooling on the counter. The house smelled like cinnamon and apples and everything I thought was safe. "What is it, baby?" I said. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. That was the first time I thought, oh God, something terrible has happened to him. Something at work, something with Kelly, something with the girls. My mind went to every dark place a mother's mind can go. Cancer, accident, debt. I reached across the table and took his hand. "Brian, what is it?" He pulled his hand away. That was the second sign. My son had never pulled his hand away from me. Not when he was 5 and fell off his bike. Not when he was 15 and his girlfriend broke up with him. Not when his father died and I held him at the funeral. He always let me hold him, but not that night. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk about the house." I blinked. The house. Not cancer. Not the girls. The house. "What about the house?" I said. He took a long drink of his beer. Then he set the bottle down and folded his hands on the table like he was about to give a presentation at work. He was a real estate agent. He sold houses for a living. He knew how to talk about square footage and interest rates and closing costs. That was the voice he used with me that night. Not a son talking to his mother. A salesman talking to a client. "Dad left the house to you in the will," he said. "But legally, the house is part of the estate, and the estate needs to be settled." "Frank died 3 years ago," I said. "The estate was settled. The lawyer handled everything."
The house was mine. Frank made sure of that. He sat me down at this very table 6 months before he died and showed me the paperwork. He said, "This house will always be yours. No one can take it from you." He had tears in his eyes when he said it. Frank was not a crying man. Brian shook his head. That was the moment I realized my son had been planning this conversation for weeks, maybe months. His words were too smooth. His voice was too calm. "There was a codicil to the will," he said, "a document Dad signed a few months before he died. It says the house should be sold and the proceeds divided equally between me and Michael." I felt something cold move through my chest. It was like someone poured ice water directly into my blood. "That is not true," I said. "It is true, Mom. I have the document." "Where did you get it?" Brian looked down at the table. He traced the grain of the wood with his finger. "That table had been in my family for 50 years. It was my grandmother's table. I ate every Thanksgiving dinner on that table. I taught both my boys how to write their names on that table, and my son was sitting there trying to steal my house from under me." "Kelly found it," he said, "when she was helping you clean out the attic last spring. It was in a box of Dad's old papers. She thought it was important, so she gave it to me." I remembered that day. Kelly came over and we spent 5 hours going through boxes. I made her lunch. I gave her a necklace that belonged to my mother. She hugged me and said I was the best mother-in-law anyone could ask for. All the while, she had that document in her purse. All the while, she was smiling and eating my chicken salad and letting Sophie draw on my floor with washable markers. She was a spy in my house. They both were. "I need to see it," I said. Brian took a folded piece of paper out of his back pocket. He unfolded it and slid it across the table. I put on my reading glasses. My hands were shaking. The paper looked real. It had Frank's signature at the bottom. I knew his signature. I watched him sign checks and birthday cards and permission slips for 42 years. That was his handwriting. But something was wrong. The date was wrong. Frank was already too sick to sign anything on that date. He was in the hospital that week. He could barely hold a pen. "This isn't real," I said. Brian's face changed, just for a second. Something hard and cold appeared behind his eyes. Then it was gone. He looked like my son again. But I had seen it. The mask slipping, the stranger underneath. "Mom, the lawyer already validated it. The house has to go on the market next month." I stood up. My legs were weak. I had to hold on to the table to steady myself. "You are lying," I said, "or someone is lying to you. Frank would never do this. He promised me. He promised me on his deathbed." Brian stood up too. He was taller than me. He always had been. But that night he seemed to tower over me, like a building about to fall. "Mom, I'm not trying to hurt you, but Michael and I talked about this. You can't afford to stay here alone. The taxes alone are too much, and you're almost 72. You don't need a 4-bedroom house." "I don't need it," I said. "I want it. It's mine. Your father and I built this life together. I raised you in this house. I changed your diapers in that bathroom. I watched you take your first steps on that floor. You don't get to take that from me." Brian picked up his beer bottle and walked to the sink. He rinsed it out and set it in the drying rack. He had done that 1,000 times as a teenager, but that night the gesture felt like a goodbye. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "We can talk about finding you an apartment. Something smaller, something easier to maintain." "I don't want an apartment," I said. "I want my house." He walked to the front door. He put his hand on the knob. Then he turned back to look at me.
His face was soft again, almost sad, but I didn't believe it anymore. "I'm sorry, Mom. This is what Dad wanted." Then he walked out and closed the door behind him. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The pie was cold. The house was silent. I looked at the dogwood tree through the window. The leaves were starting to turn red. I planted that tree when Michael was born. I watched it grow from a twig into something solid and strong and rooted deep in the ground, just like my boys. Or so I thought. I called Michael that night. He was the oldest.
He was the one who called me every Sunday. He was the one who drove 2 hours to take me to my colonoscopy when I was too embarrassed to ask anyone else. He was the good one. Or I thought he was. He answered on the third ring. I could hear a TV in the background, some sports thing. His wife Carla was saying something in the background, but I couldn't make out the words. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Everything okay?" "Brian was just here," I said. "He told me something about the house, about a codicil to Bad's will. He said you and him talked about selling the house." There was a pause, a long one. "Michael," I said, "talk to me." "Mom," he said, "I can explain." "Explain what?" He sighed. I heard him walk into another room. A door closed. Then his voice was quieter, more careful. "Brian found that document last spring. He took it to a lawyer. The lawyer said it was legit. Mom, I didn't want to believe it either, but we have to follow Dad's wishes." "Your father's dying wish was that I keep this house," I said. "He told me that. He looked me in the eye and he told me that." "Maybe he changed his mind," Michael said. "Near the end, people get confused. The medication, the pain. Maybe he signed it and forgot." "Frank was not confused," I said. "Frank knew exactly what he was doing until his last breath. He made me promise. He made me swear on our marriage." Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that broke something inside me, something I did not know could break. "Mom, you need to think about the future."
"You're not getting any younger, and Carla and I have been talking. The girls need to go to college. We could really use our share of the money." "Your share," I said. "It's not your share. It's my house. It's Dad's house too, Mom, and Dad left it to all of us." That was not true. I knew it was not true, but Michael believed it, or he wanted to believe it, or he was lying to me the same way Brian was lying. I did not know which one was worse. I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark kitchen for another hour. Then I went to the bedroom Frank and I shared for 40 years. I opened the closet and pulled down the shoebox from the top shelf. Inside was Frank's real will, the one we signed together at the lawyer's office, the one that left everything to me: the house, the savings, the car, the life insurance, everything. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. There was no codicil. There was no mention of selling the house. There was no mention of Michael or Brian getting anything until after I died. That was what Frank wanted. That was what we both wanted. I knew it in my bones. Someone had forged that document, or Frank had been tricked into signing it, or Brian had manufactured it himself. I did not want to believe that last one, but I had seen my son's face at the kitchen table. I had seen the coldness behind his eyes. I had seen a stranger wearing my baby boy's skin. The next few weeks were a nightmare. I hired a lawyer.
A woman named Diane who wore pantsuits and spoke in a voice that never changed pitch. She was expensive. I paid her with money Frank left me for emergencies. This was an emergency. Diane told me the codicil would be hard to fight. It had Frank's signature. It was notarized. The notary was a woman named Patricia who worked at a UPS store 20 miles away. Patricia did not remember Frank, but her logbook showed he came in on the date the document was signed, the same week he was in the hospital. Diane said we could challenge the notary. We could bring in medical records to show Frank was too sick to drive 20 miles to a UPS store. We could hire a handwriting expert. We could take it to court, but it would cost money, and time, and energy I did not have. Meanwhile, Brian and Michael stopped calling. Just like that. 41 years of being a mother, and suddenly my phone was silent. No Sunday calls, no checking in, no "Hey Mom, what's for dinner?" Nothing. I called them both multiple times. They did not answer. I left voicemails. They did not call back. Kelly stopped bringing the girls over. I showed up at their house one afternoon, and she came to the door, but she did not open it. She talked to me through the glass. "I'm sorry, Martha," she said. She called me Martha, not Mom. Martha. "Let me see the girls," I said. "Please, just for 5 minutes." She shook her head. "Brian doesn't think it's a good idea right now, with everything going on." everything going on?
She said it like I had done something wrong, like I was the one who started a war, like I was the one who tried to steal something that did not belong to me. I stood on their porch for another minute. I could see Emma through the window. She was watching TV. She did not see me. If she had seen me, she would have run to the door. She loved me. I knew she loved me. But Kelly pulled the curtains closed, and that was that. I drove home crying so hard I had to pull over on the side of the road. I sat in my car on a residential street in a neighborhood I did not recognize. The leaves were falling. A man walked his dog past my car and looked at me with concern. I wanted to roll down the window and tell him everything. I wanted to scream at a stranger that my sons were trying to steal my house, and my granddaughters were gone, and my husband was dead, and I was completely alone. But I just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel and my forehead on my hands, and I cried until there was nothing left. The court date was set for January. The holidays came and went. I spent Thanksgiving alone. I made a turkey breast and mashed potatoes and ate them at the kitchen table with a placemat where Frank used to sit. I watched the Macy's parade on the small TV in the living room. I did not put up a Christmas tree. What was the point? There was no one to see it, no one to put presents under it, no little hands to tear the wrapping paper. On Christmas morning, I drove to Brian's house. I parked across the street. I watched through the window as Kelly helped Emma open a dollhouse. Sophie was jumping up and down in her pajamas. Brian was drinking coffee and laughing at something on his phone. They looked happy. They looked like a family. And I was on the outside looking in, like a ghost who had not realized she was dead yet. I thought about knocking on the door. I thought about begging. I thought about falling to my knees in the snow and telling Brian I would give him anything, the house, the money, my blood if he wanted it. Just let me hold my granddaughters again. Just let me be their grandmother. But I did not knock. I sat in my car until my hands were numb from the cold. Then I drove home and ate leftover turkey and went to bed at 7 o'clock. The week before the court date, Diane called me with bad news. The handwriting expert said the signature was likely authentic. The notary's logbook was messy but plausible. The judge assigned to the case was known to favor strict interpretation of wills. Diane said I might lose. She said I should consider settling, let the boys buy me out, take the money and find a smaller place, avoid the legal fees and the heartache of a trial. I asked her how much money we were talking about. The house was worth $400,000. My share after selling would be about $130,000 after taxes and fees and realtor commissions. Not enough to buy another house. Not enough to live on for the rest of my life. Just enough to survive. Barely. And Brian and Michael would get the rest, $130,000 each. Money they did not earn, money they did not deserve, money Frank never intended for them to have while I was still breathing. I told Diane I wanted to fight. She told me it would cost another $15,000 just to get to trial. I told her to do it anyway. What else was I going to spend the money on? My grandchildren did not speak to me. My sons had become enemies. My friends from church stopped calling because they did not know what to say. The only thing I had left was that house, and I was not going to give it up without a fight. The trial lasted 3 days. Brian and Michael sat on one side of the courtroom. I sat on the other. They brought their wives. Kelly held Brian's hand. Carla held Michael's hand. They all wore matching expressions of sad sympathy, like I was the one who had done something wrong, like I was the unreasonable old woman who would not let go of the past. I testified first. I told the judge about Frank's promise. I told him about the hospital bed and the morphine and the way Frank squeezed my hand and said, "This house is yours forever." I started crying on the stand. I could not help it. The judge handed me a tissue. Brian and Michael did not look at me. Brian testified next. He said Frank had talked to him about selling the house before he died. He said Frank was worried about me living alone. He said Frank wanted to make sure I had money to live on instead of being house rich and cash poor. It sounded reasonable. It sounded almost kind. But it was a lie. I knew Frank. Frank would never have had that conversation with Brian without including me. Frank did not keep secrets from me, not big ones, not about money, not about the house. Michael testified after Brian. He said the same things, different words, same lies. He cried on the stand too.
He said he loved me and he hated that we were in this situation, but he kept saying the situation, as if it was a natural disaster no one could control, not a choice he and his brother had made, not a forgery they had orchestrated, just a situation. The judge took 2 weeks to make a decision. I spent those 2 weeks in the house. I walked through every room. The nursery where Michael slept in a crib my father built, the bedroom where Brian drew dinosaurs on the wall with crayons, and I was too tired to scrub them off for a month, the backyard where Frank taught the boys how to throw a baseball, the garage where Frank kept his tools organized by size, the attic where I found my wedding dress in a box and tried it on even though it did not fit anymore. I said goodbye to every corner of that house, because I knew what was coming. I could feel it in my bones, the same way I felt Frank's death before it happened, the same way I knew Brian was lying the moment he sat down at the kitchen table. Some things you just know.
Even when you do not want to know them. The judge ruled against me. He said the codicil was valid. He said Frank's medical records showed he was lucid on the date in question. He said the notary's testimony was sufficient. He said the house must be sold, and the proceeds divided equally between Frank's 3 heirs: me, Michael, Brian. I stood up in the courtroom when the judge said that. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell everyone that Frank would never have done this, that my sons had stolen from me, that they had broken something that could never be fixed. But Diane put her hand on my arm and squeezed. She whispered, "Not here, not now. Let it go." So I let it go. I walked out of the courthouse into the cold January air. Brian and Michael were standing by their cars. Kelly was there. Carla was there. They were hugging each other, celebrating, like they had won something, like my house was a trophy. I walked past them without saying a word. I got into my car and I drove to the cemetery where Frank was buried. I sat on the frozen grass next to his headstone. I traced his name with my finger. Frank Edward Morrison, beloved husband and father, 1948 to 2020. "You promised me," I said. "You promised me I could keep the house." The wind blew, the trees creaked. The sky was gray and low and heavy with snow that would not fall. I stayed there until my legs went numb. Then I drove home, my home, for a few more weeks. The house sold in April, a young couple with 2 little boys. They walked through the open house, and the wife kept saying, "Oh, this is perfect." The husband kept saying, "We can put a swing set in the backyard." I stood in the kitchen and watched them imagine their lives in my home. The wife opened the fridge and laughed. She said, "It needs a good cleaning." She did not know that fridge held 40 years of birthday cakes and leftovers, and cartons of milk that Frank drank straight from the spout. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The complex was called Cedar Gardens, but there were no cedars and no gardens, just beige buildings with beige doors and beige carpet, and a smell of old cooking that never went away. My new bedroom was so small I could touch both walls with my arms stretched out. The living room had a window that faced a parking lot. The kitchen had a stove with 2 burners that worked. I unpacked my boxes alone. My grandmother's table did not fit in the kitchen, so I put it in the living room. It looked wrong there, like a tree growing in a parking lot. But it was mine. The table was mine. That was the only thing left that felt like home. The first year was the hardest. I did not hear from Brian or Michael for 8 months. Then on my 73rd birthday, my phone rang. It was Michael. He said, "Happy birthday." He asked how I was doing. He said Carla said to say hello. He talked about the weather. He talked about the girls. He did not mention the house. He did not apologize. He acted like nothing had happened, like he had not helped his brother steal my home. I listened to his voice, that voice I had known since before he could talk, that voice that called me mama and mom and mommy, that voice that told me he loved me every single Sunday for 41 years. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not forgiveness, just a hollow, empty space where my heart used to be. I told him I had to go. I said I was tired. I hung up the phone and I sat on my beige carpet in my beige apartment, and I looked at my grandmother's table and I thought about Frank. I thought about the day we bought the house on Maple Lane. I was 6 months pregnant with Michael. Frank carried me over the threshold. He said, "This is the beginning of the rest of our lives." He kissed me in the doorway. The realtor pretended not to see. That was 43 years ago. 43 years of mortgage payments and school lunches. in parent-teacher conferences, in dance recitals and soccer games, in graduation parties and weddings, and grandchildren. 43 years of my life poured into that house, and now it belonged to strangers. The dogwood tree was probably already gone. The young wife probably did not like the way it dropped leaves in the fall. I do not see Emma and Sophie anymore. Kelly sends me a Christmas card every year, a photo of the girls in matching dresses. They are bigger now. Emma has lost her front teeth. Sophie has grown out her hair. They do not know me. They have a new grandmother now, someone younger, someone who does not cry when she looks at them. Brian called me last month. He said he wanted to see me. He said he missed me. He said he was sorry about how things happened. He did not say the word steal or forgery or lie. He said sorry about how things happened, like the house caught on fire, like the market crashed, like a tornado came and took everything away. I told him I did not want to see him. He asked why. I said because I do not know who you are anymore. He got quiet. Then he said, "Mom, please." And that word, Mom, broke something open in my chest. Not because I forgave him, because I realized I would never stop loving him, even after everything, even after the lies and the theft and the years of silence. He was still my son, the same way the house was still my house, even though I did not live there anymore. Some things do not change just because they are taken from you. I am 74 years old now. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment with a table that does not fit and a window that faces a parking lot. I have a small garden on the balcony, tomatoes and basil and a little rosemary plant that Frank would have loved. I talk to Frank sometimes, out loud, when I am cooking or watering the plants or lying in bed unable to sleep. I tell him about my day. I tell him I miss him. I do not tell him about the boys. He would not want to know. He would not believe it anyway. Frank loved our sons more than anything in the world. He would have died before letting them hurt me. But Frank did die, and our sons did hurt me. And now I am here, in a place I never thought I would be, at an age I never thought I would reach, wondering if any of it meant anything. The marriage, the motherhood, the house, the 43 years. Was it all just a path to this apartment? Was the love real, or was I just a resource they used until I ran out? I do not have answers. I have tomatoes and basil and a rosemary plant. I have a table that remembers 50 years of Thanksgivings. I have a phone that does not ring as much as it used to. I have a heart that still beats, even though it feels like a stone. The other day, I drove past Maple Lane. I did not plan to. I just found myself on that road. The house looked different. The new owners painted it gray. The dogwood tree was gone. They cut it down. Probably the wife did not like the way it dropped leaves in the fall. I sat in my car across the street from my old home. A stranger's car was in the driveway. A stranger's curtains in the windows. A stranger's life happening in rooms I knew better than my own body. I stayed there for 10 minutes, maybe 15. Then a woman came out to get her mail. She looked at me with a curious expression. Not scared, just curious. I started my car and drove away. I did not wave. I did not cry. I just drove back to my apartment and watered my plants and sat at my grandmother's table and waited for the phone to ring. It did not ring. It never rings anymore, but I still wait. Because that is what mothers do. We wait. We love. We forgive things that cannot be forgiven. We sit in small apartments with too much furniture and not enough light, and we tell ourselves that we did our best, that our children were good ones, that somewhere inside the strangers they became, there is still a little boy who needs his mother. Maybe that is a lie too. Maybe I have been lying to myself my whole life. Maybe the betrayal was not the forgery or the lawsuit or the house. Maybe the betrayal was the moment I realized that love does not protect you, that blood does not bind, that the people you would die for are sometimes the same people who will watch you die alone. The sun is setting now. The parking lot is empty. My tomatoes need water. My rosemary is flowering. And somewhere in this city, my sons are eating dinner with their wives and their daughters, in houses I will never see. They are living their lives. They are forgetting me a little more every day. I am not forgetting them. I am sitting at a table that does not fit in a room that is too small. And I am remembering the day Michael was born. The way he opened his eyes in the delivery room. The way he looked at me like I was the whole world. The way I promised him I would always protect him. I kept that promise. He did not keep his.
The apartment is quiet now, the way the house used to be quiet after everyone left. But this quiet is different. This quiet is permanent. This quiet is the sound of a life that shrank until there was nothing left but one old woman and a table and a phone that does not ring. I will water the tomatoes now. I will make myself a small dinner. I will watch the news. I will go to bed early. And tomorrow I will wake up and do it all again. That is what survival looks like. Not fighting, not winning, just waking up, just breathing, just waiting for something that will never come. If you have children, hold them close, but do not believe they will hold you back. Do not give them your house. Do not give them your heart. Keep something for yourself. Because when they decide you are no longer useful, they will leave you in a small apartment with a window that faces a parking lot, and they will not look back. I know because I raised two of them, and they raised themselves right over me.